Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's book to show comparison for the Expanse Season 5 Episode 1 Exodus. This video is a part of a series of videos where I compare the Expanse TV show to that of its source material, pointing out the differences and giving my opinion on how well I think those adaptations work. I will be revealing events from the novels, but will not be revealing future events that happen beyond the end of Season 5, so I'll have to start with a spoiler warning for The Expanse up to the ending of Season 5. If you haven't seen up to this point, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. So our episode begins with an Earth-based science ship around Venus studying a stray asteroid that is a scientific curiosity as it hasn't been charted before. Little do they know that it was one of the rocks that Marco Nauers hurled at Earth, but it missed its target. But still, them finding out about it may warn the UN about the incoming asteroid threats, so Philip leads a team over to kill all the scientists and destroy their data, so Earth isn't warned. However, something goes wrong and one of Philip's men is stuck on the ship, unable to move right as they plan to blow it up. The man screams for Philip to save him, but Philip decides there isn't enough time, so simply tells him that he will tell Marco of his bravery before letting him die. So in the novels, this didn't occur, although it does take some inspiration from the prologue of Nemesis games, as it did a scene in Season 4 finale where Philip encountered Bobby Draper. As in the novels, the prologue describes Philip leading a strike team on a Martian base on Callisto to steal Martian stealth technology. Something there also goes wrong, and Philip decides to leave a man behind to die rather than sacrifice the mission, which ultimately is successful as he acquires the stealth technology. Now in the show, they had Philip acquire the stealth technology by double-crossing Bobby Draper's former employer, Esai, in which they killed him and Bobby barely got away with her life, but they incorporated the aspect of Philip leading a strike team and having to sacrifice a man into this scene. In the novels, a science team never discovered the rocks. In fact, the fact that Marco threw asteroids at Earth was not foreshadowed or revealed in the novels until it happened. Ultimately, I did really appreciate this scene, as it was a great and exciting way to kick off the season, and it nicely incorporated aspects of Philip's Book 5 prologue nicely, so I'm going to give this a +2. So next we go to Tycho Station, where we see the Rosnate is undergoing repairs after its recent visit to Illis. We see Naomi talking with Tycho's engineer in charge of the repairs, a woman named Sakai. The two of them seem very friendly until Sakai refers to Martians as dusters, and Naomi asks her not to, as she flies with the Martian who never called her a skinny, and so Sakai apologizes. Sakai asks to run some of the repairs past her crew, but Naomi specifies that Alex and Amos are on leave. Alex returned to Mars and Amos returned to Earth. They get into a lift taking them to Fred Johnson, and a man named Bull enters the lift before it closes, yelling at Sakai. Bull's upset that the Rosnate is getting all the repairs at a significant discount and yells at Sakai that they are running a business and not a soup kitchen. Naomi argues that the deal with Johnson predates him, but Bull says they're taking advantage of the soft spot that Johnson has for them, and he calls that stealing. So in the novels, the Rosnate did stop at Tycho Station for repairs after their adventure on Illis, and the person leading the repair team was a person named Sakai. However, in the novel, Sakai was a man, and he wasn't that friendly with the crew. He was friendly enough, but mostly all business. In the novels, we did get several chapters with Amos and Alex on Tycho while the Rosie was being repaired. However, the show chose to begin after they already left. And then there's Bull, who in the novels was a character in Book 3, Abaddon's Gate. Like the Bull here, in the novels, Bull was an old friend of Fred Johnson, who only joined the OPA because of him. However, Bull was the second officer on the Behemoth and took over most of the role that Drummer fulfilled in the show in Season 3. Ironically, in the show, Bull is now taking over the role Drummer filled in the novels, as in the books, Drummer was first introduced in Book 5 as Tycho's chief of security who helped Holden and Fred Johnson with the crisis that is about to arise. Also, the Bull in the novels was a little more stoic and not as hot-headed, plus he wouldn't blatantly use racial slurs for belters the way his show counterpart does. So I don't care that they ginger swapped Sakai, seems kind of pointless. I don't know, maybe they just like the actress that they got, but either way, it doesn't make a difference to me. I also don't mind that they began the story with Amos and Alex already gone, as in the novels they didn't really do much before they left. As for Bull, however, I do find it fascinating that they swapped Drummer for Bull after swapping Bull for Drummer in Season 3. Seems kind of poetic, but I don't particularly care for the portrayal of Bull in the show, as he's too annoying, plus I don't buy that someone who works for one of the heads of the OPA in the belt would be so blatantly racist towards belters. In the novels, Bull felt he had to earn the belters' respect, and they were the ones who were actually in fact being racist to him for being from Earth. And since they're in the belt, that actually makes a lot more sense to me. Plus, I just really liked Bull's portrayal in the books much better, so I'm going to give this a -3. When they arrive at their destination, Fred Johnson is there to greet them. Johnson goes directly to Naomi and says he wants to talk to her. Bull tries to talk to Fred to complain about the Rossi's prices, but Fred shoots him a look that makes it clear he wants to talk to Naomi alone, so Bull gets the hint and leaves. Fred Johnson then informs Naomi that he got a message from one of his operatives on Palace Station that made a positive ID on her son Philip, and he shows her a picture of Philip and says, "This is your son." This continues off of a scene in Season 4 where Naomi asks Johnson to find Philip, and now she knows where he is. So in the novels, Naomi doesn't enlist Fred to find Philip. In fact, she doesn't go looking for Philip at all. It's Marco who contacts Naomi and tells her Philip is in danger and asks her to come, and it turns out to be a trap in order to capture Naomi. Now, in the novels, at this stage, Marco isn't the known quantity that he is in the show, so it's a different dynamic. But honestly, I think both ways work for their respective mediums, so I'm going to give this a 0. When they go over to Amos, we then go over to Amos, who is journeying on a Belter passenger ship to Luna, where he's going to catch a shuttle to Earth. He goes into the lower class cabins, even at the insistence that the first class is 2 decks up, something he can more than afford. But Amos simply asks the 2 men there if they snore, to which they reply no. There's an elderly woman in a nearby bed, and she shakes some pills, indicating that she won't snore. The 2 men, Giango and Rico, explain that they're on their way to Luna as there's lots of jobs for belters there, with all the ships preparing to go through the ring. But Amos shoots him a look that tells them to shut up so he can sleep. Then a thug comes in and tells everyone there that they should give him money for insurance because you never know what will happen to them if they don't. So a very obvious protection racket. Just as Jianggu and Rico are about to pay, however, Amos interrupts them and tells the thug a story about how he managed to repair an engine with a coolant leak, meaning that he had to do repairs while holding his breath. The thug tries to interrupt several times, not seeing the point of the story, but Amos kept going. Once he was done with his story, the thug asks him, "So what?" Amos pulls himself up to a standing position to intimidate the thug and tells him he discovered that day that he could withstand strenuous activity while holding his breath for over 2 minutes, and then tells the thug he needs to ask himself how much damage he can do to him before the knockout gas knocks him out, because he's guessing it's a lot. The thug's associate then comes in to ask if there's a problem, And Amos replies that there isn't and makes it clear no one in this cabin needs to pay for any of their insurance. The new thug asks Amos what crew he runs with, mistaking him for a fellow thug, but then Amos answers the Rosnate, and the thug dismisses him and tells him that maybe he fucked up. Amos replies that they'll find out sooner or later, and the thug agrees, and then they both leave the cabin. Jiangu and Rico ask why he did that, clearly afraid he made things worse, but Amos seems unconcerned and then goes off to have a shower. Jiangu and Rico don't think that's a good idea, as they will surely try to kill him there, but Amos just replies that he hates waiting. And sure enough, as soon as Amos is in the shower, a gang of thugs surround him and tell him they can't let him get away with it and suggest he just take his beating, but Amos doesn't care much for that suggestion and then proceeds to beat the ever-loving crap out of the whole gang, leaving them all hurt and severely injured. So this is very similar to what happened in the novels, although in the books, Amos's interaction with his bunkmate goes on for much longer before they encounter the thugs, and a major difference is that Jiangu and Rico are a couple that have a daughter, which is a huge motivation as to why he feels the need to stand up to the thugs. And after Amos beats the thugs, Jiangu and Rico thank him, but Amos replies that he didn't do it for them, suggesting he did it for their daughter, and then threatens them that if they don't treat her right, he'll come find them. I suppose the reason why the show left the daughter out was to simplify and shorten the scene, but I think it changes the whole dynamic of the scene, as in the show, Amos's motivation is that he simply hates bullies and is just in the mood to beat the crap out of people, whereas the novels emphasizes Amos's need to protect children, which is an important aspect of Amos's character that the show has touched on before, and of course speaks to his own rough childhood, which is why he has the desire to do so, which is relevant to the story of the season. So I gotta say, I do prefer the book's version of events slightly because of that dynamic, so I'm going to give this a -1. Next, we see Holden at a bar eating some Chinese food when he's approached by Monica Stewart. Holden greets her and tells her that she looks well, but she starts asking about the protomolecule. Holden insists that the protomolecule is old news, that all the samples have been destroyed, but she isn't so sure. She asks why a science team is still studying the protomolecule if it's destroyed, but Holden plays dumb, insisting that he knows nothing about it. She then asks him if he ever got a sample, and he says no. They are then interrupted by other people in the bar calling Holden out and cheering the Rosnate. Holden cheers back and recognizes them. Monica then continues telling him if he knows where the protomolecule is, that he has an obligation to tell people about it. He dodges the accusation and leaves. So in the novels, Monica Stewart also approaches Holden, but it's not until after Naomi has left. Holden is described as being so lonely he doesn't know what to do with himself and is hanging out in an Italian restaurant that apparently serves really bad food. So that is why he agrees to meet Monica Stewart out of sheer boredom. However, in the novels, Monica doesn't want to talk to him about the protomolecule, but rather a bunch of ships that went missing. Apparently, several ships traveling through the ring gates have disappeared. Since there were so many ships traveling through the ring gates, no one really noticed until now. Monica has a theory that the protomolecule creators are somehow involved, and she wants Holden to contact Miller to ask him about it. Holden tries to explain that he isn't in contact with Miller anymore since the protomolecule piece was removed from the Rosnate's hull, but she suggests trying to gain access to Fred Johnson's sample, which Monica is well aware that Johnson has a sample. When Holden asks how she knows, she simply says that she has her sources. Anyway, she wants to try to use the samples to somehow contact Miller. Holden calls what she's describing a seance and thinks it's one of the most ridiculous ideas he's ever heard and blows her off. I think this scene works better in the show as it's less ridiculous and more relevant to the current events of the storyline season 5. Although I will say I was disappointed that the show didn't foreshadow the ships disappearing through the ring gates the way the books did, but in isolation I think this scene works better in the show. So I'm going to give this a +2. On Mars, we see Bobby Draper buying black market Martian military technology from a mysterious seller who has ties to the military. She asks if she could also acquire military-grade torpedoes, but the seller isn't interested in that and claims to not know anything about that. Bobby Draper pushes him, saying that she has a buyer who's very interested and has a lot of money. But when he does so, he says they're done here and leaves. We then see Bobby recording a message for Avasarala, where it's clear that Avasarala is bankrolling Bobby in an attempt to investigate the corruption in the Martian military, where Bobby reports that she has just burned a contact. Now, in the books, first of all, the events that occurred in Season 4 with Bobby being involved in a black market trade and stumbling across a conspiracy in the Martian military never occurred. Instead, Avasarala met with Bobby to warn her about how Mars is falling apart because of all the new colonizable worlds on the other side of the ring gates. And rather than investigating a conspiracy to sell military equipment on the black market, Bobby is in fact also investigating missing ships. In this case, many Martian military vessels that have gone missing that Avasarala brought to her attention. And I actually find Bobby investigating the selling of military equipment to the black market much more interesting, particularly the way it's done here, where she's going full James Bond spy type thing. So I'm going to give this a +3. Back on Tycho, Holden angrily barges into Fred Johnson's office demanding to speak with him. Holden drills him about the proto molecule and if he and dolls are experimenting with it. Johnson refuses to answer, but only says that it's in good hands. Holden suggests that it's dangerous and that he should destroy his sample. To back up his claim, Holden plays for Fred Johnson a recording from Elvie Okoye, where she describes her experience when she fell into the anomaly on Illis, which also includes a visual representation of what she experienced. Holden explains that these aliens wiped out the protomolecule creators and now humanity is using their stuff, suggesting they may be waking them up. But Johnson asks how many people these aliens killed, and when Holden says none yet, Johnson suggests all Holden is worried about is pure speculation, as millions of people cross through the ring gates without incident. Johnson then shows Holden images of Belter warships being constructed that he plans to use to police the ring gates without any help from the Inners, and then he tells Holden once they're up and running and the OPA has independence, then they can talk about destroying the protomolecule sample and not before. Johnson then suggests that Holden should stop worrying about the end of the world, as he has a good crew and someone he loves, and he should instead focus on that. So in the novels, Holden does go see Fred Johnson after he talks with Monica Stewart, but since his talk with Monica Stewart was different, so was his subsequent talk with Johnson. In the novels, he doesn't angrily barge into his office like he does here, but rather they have a calm conversation about what Monica said about the missing ships. Holden tells him her idea to use the protomolecule to contact Miller, and Johnson thinks it's just as silly as Holden does. But Holden does suggest there is an issue that they need to investigate. Holden comes up with several scenarios on why 3% of ships that travel through the ring gates go missing. He comes up with 3 different scenarios. One is OPA extremists destroyed them, but since the ships that are missing go missing on the other side of the ring gates, they both rule that out. Another one is that OPA extremists plant bombs on the ship, which aren't triggered until after the ships go through the ring gates, which also seems unlikely. And the third suggestion is that there are extremists on Medina Station falsifying records and participating in the destruction of these ships. Now, Fred Johnson doesn't much care for that last theory at all, as he assures Holden such a breach on Medina is impossible, as he put his best and most trustworthy men on Medina. And if Medina has fallen to extremists, that means there's no point in doing anything at all, because that means everything that Fred Johnson does is meaningless. Johnson then talks about how Holden is just lonely because his crew has all left and he's looking for something to occupy his time, and suggests that he drops it. When Holden prepares to leave, Johnson comes to the inescapable conclusion that he's not going to drop it. Holden confirms that is in fact the case, but promises to keep Fred Johnson in the loop. Now, the book's version do work for what they set up, and again, I think the foreshadowing of the disappearing ships does nicely set up for the ending of the book, but I still prefer the show's version, as again, it feels more relevant and true to Holden's character, that he's still insistent in destroying all proto-molecule samples everywhere, and I like the reference to LV and Illis, and it makes sense he would bring that up to support his argument, so I'm going to give this a +2. We then go back to Mars, where we see Alex is on his way to see his ex-wife. When he shows up, she's not at all happy to see him and asks what he's doing here. He says he's here to see her and their son. She simply says their son is away on a trip for school and begins to close the door on him. He asks her to wait a minute and tells her how sorry he is. She then asks him what answer is he looking for. As she says if she says they're fine, then he can feel okay about himself, as he abandoned them didn't negatively affect them, or if she says that they're miserable, he can feel self-important that his absence caused them so much pain. Alex stammers, not knowing how to reply to that, and she tells him that the answer is he doesn't get to know because he's not a part of their lives anymore and they don't owe him any closure, and she slams the door on him. Now, in the novels, Alex also goes to visit his ex-wife, Talisa, but in the books, they never had a kid together, and they divorced a much longer time ago. When Alex goes to find her, she finds her gardening in a communal garden outside of her home, and approaches her there. She also asks what he's doing there, and Alex asks her if she wants to go out for some tea. She is astonished and asks if he thinks they're going to reminisce about old times over tea and maybe fall into bed together. Alex tries to object, but she tells him that is not going to happen, that they're just two people who used to know each other, or maybe even less than that now. And they inadvertently start arguing about how Alex abandoned her, but she stops the conversation, saying that talking about the past is exactly what she didn't want to do. And she doesn't want to be the bad guy, but Alex put her in this position, not the other way around. So Alex apologizes for coming and leaves. As he goes, he realizes the reason he didn't call her in advance was because he thought it would be harder for her to turn him away in person, and perhaps it was, and he just made things worse for her by showing up unannounced, and he felt really guilty about it. So ultimately, I would describe Talisa's reaction in the show as more hostile than in the novels, as in the novels, Talisa also gave Alex the cold shoulder, but wasn't trying to be mean or hostile about it, simply stating that they had no business together anymore. Whereas in the show, Talisa wasn't hiding her feelings about Alex and how angry she was at him. Plus, the dynamic is just different because they have a son in the show who he also abandoned. So I think both versions work for their respective medians. The extra dynamic of having a son makes Talisa more cruel by denying Alex access to their son, but it also makes her anger at Alex a bit more justified, as she just didn't abandon her, he also abandoned their son. So both ways work, so I'm going to give this a 0. Alex then meets up with Bobby Draper at a bar called Los Compadres, which is a very cheesy Western themed bar with cowboy music playing and people wearing cheesy glowing cowboy hats, and the stools are saddles. Bobby waits until Alex finishes up a call with his son, and then Alex calls Bobby over to catch up. However, Bobby refuses to sit and instead is rather standoffish. When Alex asks her about her brother, she mentions they haven't spoken in a while. Alex tells her that he's sure that they'll patch things up, and she asks why. Why is he so sure? He just says because that she's her, and that she needs to stay positive. She argues that she's staying realistic. Alex then explains how Talissa slammed the door in his face, but he's going to try again with her. She tells him that he's an idiot and that he needs to get it through his head. If he wanted to have a family, he should have been there for them 3 years ago. Alex tells her to calm down, but she huffs and says that today wasn't a good day for this and leaves. So in the novels, Los Compadres was a normal bar. As far as I know, it wasn't described as being very cheesy and cowboyish as it's portrayed here. Also, Alex didn't meet Bobby there. He went there to drink alone. When the bartender asked him what's the occasion, Alex replies that it turns out that he's an asshole. So Alex in the novels realized his mistakes and felt bad for them, unlike his show counterpart who was oblivious to his mistakes and remained stupidly optimistic. However, when Alex did meet Bobby in the novels, it was for dinner, and their conversation was a lot more friendly as Alex admitted to his mistake of trying to see his ex-wife, and Bobby agreed with him. She didn't get all upset and yell at him like she does here, and frankly, I didn't like this scene in the show. It seems out of character for Bobby, and her being hostile just seems for the sake of it to raise the stakes or make it more aggressive or whatever. I much preferred it when the two got along. Plus, I like the fact that Alex in the books realizes that he was being an asshole, where in the show he is being more of an asshole by not being aware of it. So I'm going to give this a -4. Next, we go back to Tycho, where we see Holden arrive back at his quarters to find Naomi, where he apologizes for being late because he was talking to Fred, but then he noticed Naomi is really distraught. She tells him outright that Fred Johnson found her son Philip for her, and he's on Palace Station, and she's going to go find him because he may not be there long. Holden says that he'll get the Rosinante ready as soon as possible, but Naomi interrupts, saying that she's booked a freighter that leaves in a couple hours. Holden then says that he'll pack and be ready by then, but Naomi interrupts him again and tells him that he's not coming, that she has to do this alone. Holden tries to insist, but she tells him that he'd be out of place there and hurt her chances. He says that he'll stay on the freighter and be there in case she needs backup, but she tells him outright she needs to do this alone and she does not want him to come along. She then tells him that Philip's father is Marco Inaros. Holden becomes very concerned as Marco's a wanted man, and if Philip's with him it could be dangerous, but Naomi assures him that Philip isn't with Marco. Naomi gets upset and starts crying and says that if Philip's father gets him killed, she'll never be able to live with it, and Holden embraces her. So in the novels, at this stage, the audience is unaware of who Philip and Marco Inaros are. More to the point, Holden doesn't know that Naomi has a son. In the show, Naomi told Holden about her son in Season 3, and it was brought up again in Season 4. In the books, it was never mentioned, and it was not mentioned in this scene either. Naomi doesn't tell Holden she's going to find her son. She tells him point blank she needs to go off in the belt to do something, and he can't come with her or even ask her about it. She says that she's leaving. Either way, she's either leaving because he loves her and understands her and understands enough not to ask her about it, or she says that she's leaving because they've broken up. She asks if they're broken up, and he says no, so she says thanks for understanding and gets up to leave. And Holden is a bit confused. But nonetheless, Naomi leaves to find Philip. So I mentioned in videos regarding previous seasons that I much preferred the show's version where Naomi told Holden about Philip a while ago, and I think that pays off well here. To be honest, Naomi's unwillingness to tell Holden about Phillips in the books seems more, it speaks more ill of their relationship. It seems more superficial, and it comes off as kind of plot convenience in order to keep this information from the reader. Whereas this scene in the show is brilliant and showcases the love these two characters have for each other and the overwhelming guilt Naomi feels at abandoning her son, and it's performed wonderfully with very good, powerful music, and overall it's just a much better scene in every way, so I'm going to give this a +5. We then go to Luna as the shuttle Amos is on is arriving there. We follow him as he takes a lift into Luna, and just as he's about to enter the station, he's intercepted by 2 UN officers. Amos tells him that he didn't start the fight and that they were alive when he left them, but the officers don't know what he's talking about and tell him that he isn't under arrest, that they're his escorts. They take him to see Christian Avasarala, and she says that he's looked better, but he tells her that she looks great. She asks him why he's going to Earth, and he tells her it's none of her business, but she thinks it has something to do with Holden, and tells him that he won't gain entry into Earth until he tells her. So he mentioned that a friend of his died, and he's going down to handle her estate. She then pours him a cup of whiskey, and he asks what it's for, and she says it's for teaching her how to walk in mag boots, as it comes in handy in this godforsaken place. Amos responds by saying that they both had very different life experiences. A general then enters her office wanting to talk to her, so she asks Amos if he intends to kill anyone. When he doesn't answer, she tells him that she won't bail him out if he does, but he simply asks if he can leave, and Avasarala tells him that he can. Now, in the novels, Amos actually arrives on Earth before Avasarala speaks to him. After his shuttle from Luna arrives in New York, and after he passes through customs, an official-looking officer approaches him with a whole squadron of UN soldiers and places him in handcuffs. They drag him to a room with a large screen where he talks to Avasarala, who is still on Luna. Avasarala asks what he's doing on her planet and is certain that Holden sent him there, and interrogates him a bit. Once Amos convinces her he's on personal business that has nothing to do with Holden, she lets him go, but tells him not to stay long. So in the books, Avasarala's conversation with Amos is more hostile, which always seemed a bit odd to me, even in the timeline of the novels. After all, they did work together to solve the crisis of the protomolecule hybrids at the end of Book 2, and she had a good relationship with Holden in Book 4, so I didn't really get why she was being so hostile here. I thought her demeanor in the show made way more sense, as she was suspicious and questioning him, but not in being overly hostile about it. Also, it makes more sense that she would just see him when he's on Luna rather than waiting to talk to him on a screen once he got to Earth. So I'm going to give this a +4. So the general that entered Avasarala's office was UN General Delgado, who is Avasarala's closest ally on Luna, as she has been stationed there by Nancy Gao to supervise colony ships leaving for the ring gates, which Gal no doubt finds irony in, as Avasarala was the one who opposed letting ships go through the ring gates in the first place. So she has fallen out of favor and has very few allies left, but Delgado is her closest one. Delgado tells Avasarala about the science vessel that was destroyed near Venus that was originally determined to be caused by a micrometeor shower. However, Delgado now believes it may not have been, as he shows her footage that shows what appears to be a drive plume shortly after the science ship was destroyed. And the drive plume appears to have come from a Belter skiff, and Delgado believes it could have been one from Marco Inaros' faction, but he's not sure. Avasarala promises Delgado to save him a front row seat when they hang Marco Inaros, and he promises to bring the popcorn. But they're unsure of why he would destroy a science vessel around Venus. We then see Avasarala watching a speech Marco gave to a bunch of belters where he talks about how the inners think they are weak, and because they think they are weak, they can be audacious. And then we cut to Marco looking at the path of some of the asteroids he threw and how some of them lead directly to Earth. So, in the novels, Avasarala didn't have any viewpoint chapters in this book, so she barely appears. She was stationed on Luna, but she was never the Secretary General in the past, and never fell out of favor with the government. She was, in fact, Nancy Gow's second in command, and Admiral Delgado wasn't a character in the books, he was invented for the show. No doubt to flesh out Avasarala's storyline and give her something to react to. Further, as I mentioned before, the fact that Marco threw asteroids at Earth was never foreshadowed in the books the way it was in the show. Although I do like the surprise element the asteroid attacks had in the books, I do appreciate the fleshed out Avasarala's storyline more in the show, as I found it added a lot more to the story overall, and I like the character of Delgado. I thought he added to the story nicely, so I'm going to give this a +2. So my final adaptation score for Exile is a +12. Overall, a pretty great adaptation. A few places, such as Bobby Draper treating Alex like shit, I thought they kind of fumbled a bit. But overall, I thought they added more to the character stories and fleshed them out more and gave them more emotional weight. And overall, it made for a lot more emotionally powerful story. So, pretty good adaptation. So that's it for my book-to-show comparison for The Expanse Season 5, Episode 1. I'll return next week for my coverage of Episode 2. So be sure to keep an eye out for that. And also check out my channel for many more Expanse videos, as well as many other videos on other shows like Star Trek Breaking Bad, The Outer Limits, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.